Immigration is the favourite topic of the right wing, the political right wing, and the far right in the UK and around the world. Very simple. What they can say is that all your problems are caused by people putting strain on the system, and these people are coming from abroad and they're causing the strain. They're taking jobs, they're putting strain on public services, whatever. And it's really, really handy narrative because it means they can blame someone who looks different, maybe has different cultural attitudes, maybe has different beliefs, which means that people are very, very likely to just intrinsically buy that narrative and make them believe that immigrants are a significant problem within society. However, there's another way of looking at all of these problems. That is, if there's strain being put on your public services, strain being put on housing, we can just blame the government. If there's not enough houses to go around, we can blame the government for not having built enough social housing. If there's a long line at the hospital, we blame the government for not putting enough money into the hospital. This is really important, because if we do that, we can finally accept where the responsibility lies in society. Because the thing is, we actually need immigration in most societies in order to sustain existing welfare states and existing economies, right? So in the UK, we need significant amount of immigration for doctors and nurses in the NHS. We need them for construction workers. We need students who come in and pay lots of money so that the local students can get comparatively quite cheap tuition. In Scotland, free. In England, not quite expensive actually, but it's still heavily subsidised by foreign students. So we actually need a lot of this immigration. And so therefore it's the government's responsibility to take that into account and provide the resources necessary so that this doesn't become a problem. Because obviously, if your school is really struggling because there are a bunch of new kids coming in who don't even speak English as their first language, obviously everyone's going to feel the negative effects of that. So therefore, it's the government's responsibility to make sure those schools have more funding, have more resources in order to be able to deal with that, right? And that's how we do it. And see, if the government doesn't do this, and instead what the government does is they say we want to cut funding because we want to be efficient, what they're doing is they're implementing austerity. This is very, very handy for them because they can then, with the guise of austerity, make public services worse, but that's fine because then they can blame immigrants for it. And then they don't actually see any negative electoral consequences from decimating public services, reducing people's quality of life, and obviously literally killing people in the cases of you cause people to be homeless or you don't give them proper healthcare, right? And so this is the way that they're able to bring in austerity, which is absolutely terrible for our economy, absolutely terrible for our public services, and they get away with it because they blame immigration. So what we need to do, two central things. First of all, we must oppose austerity. It's the name of this channel, of course I'm going to say it. Austerity is, but also even just where extra pressure is being put on government services, public services, and funding is not being increased, that also counts as austerity, and we also need to fight against that. So, for example, between 2010 and 2015, the austerity Tory Lib Dem coalition, right? They didn't ever cut the real term funding of the NHS. They didn't ever cut the nominal funding of the NHS. However, they did cut real terms per capita by not increasing funding in line with population growth, additional pressure from an ageing population, and in line with inflation, which is what they should have done. And not doing that is itself austerity, and we must oppose this. The second thing is that we need to reject the narrative that immigrants are responsible for problems in society when we can clearly find someone else to blame, specifically the government. Why? First of all, because the government can actually do something about it. Second of all, we need immigration, as I've already explored. And so this is why it's very important that we actually listen when people say immigration is a big problem. Listen to what they're actually saying, listen to what their argument is, and think, is this actually really the fault of immigrants? Is it the fault of austerity? Is it the fault of the government? And then we can finally reject the narrative which has been gripping large parts of the world, which is putting figures like Trump, like Modi, like Wilders into power, like Bolsonaro into power, that will put more figures like Le Pen into power, like Farage into power. We reject that narrative, and therefore we can break down their political coalitions and their political movements, and instead build up a popular movement of the left who can then actually reverse austerity, oppose austerity, and implement positive policies which actually benefit everyone. Policies like nationalisation and worker control of key industries, talking things like energy, very, very important. Things like increasing minimum wages so people actually get proper pay for the work they do. Introducing more redistributive taxes so that poor people get money in the form of public services benefits, basic income potentially, from wealthier people, so we have a fairer society. That's what we have to do. And the first step to doing this is we oppose austerity and we oppose the narrative that immigrants are responsible. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Obviously, if you're still not quite sure what austerity is or what the problems with austerity are, I have videos on my channel about that. Obviously, other places you can also look. And obviously, as always, a massive thanks to Relatable Memes for promoting the channel. And I hope to see you in the next one.